Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 102, The Remix, in which we're going to give you some great, exciting updates on the podcast, as well as some upcoming events that we have going on here. So the reason we're remixing this podcast, and it's still going to include a great saying that I heard, observation without assumption, which said a lot about, how we train and what's really set us apart on training individuals. But we have some news on our online long-range shooting school that just isn't going to make it practical for all of the reasons of people we can and cannot train. And with that being said, means the podcast is back on, full on, and lots of great content that's going to be coming out over the next several months. So we'll have more about the online long-range shooting school here at the end of the podcast after we talk about the observation without assumption. But I did want to make the announcement and do the remix on the fact that we are going to continue on the podcast on a weekly basis, which we're excited about, and lots of great content we're going to repost, starting with our complete Fundamentals of Marksmanship series that we had posted up years ago. We're going to repost that next, and then after that, we're going to do an updated version, which was our 4 pillars of marksmanship. And so we've got lots of great content that's going to be posted up after this segment, so keep an eye out. We'll get several posted up this week and several next week on the fundamentals to try to get everybody all tuned up for summer and spring shooting and back into the full swing of the podcast. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, but here we go. So real quick, I would like to say thank you to Trigger Tech. They are a proud sponsor of the show, maker of fine triggers. We put them in all of our custom rifles. So standard equipment in all of our custom rifles is the Trigger Tech Special, one of my favorite dual purpose tactical, hunting, you name it, you can do it type trigger. And it's so important that that's what we offer standard in all of our custom rifles. But if you have a great rifle, custom or otherwise, and you really want to upgrade your game, put a great trigger in it, you can stop over to triggertech.com and select yours today. Also, we'd like to thank MDT, also a proud sponsor of the show and maker of world-class chassis. So MDT has been making fantastic chassis. We've been using them here at the shooting school for probably more than 5 years. And they have a bunch of new ones coming out, including the HNT26 that we have here in our showroom now, and that we've actually built several custom rifles on, and the long-awaited J. Allen and the second generation MDT ACC coming out soon. So looking forward to all of those. So stop over to mdttac.com, mdttac.com today. All right, so there's a saying that says observation without assumption, and it's one of my favorites for teaching, and I think it's one of the reasons why we've always really, I teach the long-range shooting school here, and I always have guest instructors. I'm always blessed to have fantastic people helping when we need them. So when we had 8 and 12 students on the firing line, we certainly had to have that extra set of hands, those extra set of eyes, just for safety-wise. And one of the reasons why it's so hard to hire instructors for, say, that you could just almost turn over a shooting school to is because there's a difference between, teaching a subject and then learning the skills of teaching and mastering a subject with the core of passing it on. So when I start watching a shooter shoot, or if I'm trying to observe a shooter on the firing line and things aren't going well, I can never really put my finger on it to where, what I was doing when I was watching, like trying to explain it to other instructors. And what I've learned over the years is that a lot of times what they've learned to do is either look at it and try to apply something that I've done in the past or said in the past and, try to see if that fixes it, and then try to see if that fixes it, and then come up with something else, try to see if that fixes it. But I think what has finally dawned on me is that they are only exposed to all the things that they've seen over the course of the classes that they've attended. And so they have a very narrow scope of things that they've observed and things that they can pass on. When I look at a shooter, the first thing I do is I don't assume that I know anything, right? I don't assume that I know what the problem is. I start observing. and I start looking at and breaking down every piece of what the shooter's doing, where the rifle's at, the different components of the rifles. I mean, there's just like this giant mental thing that I go through. And unfortunately, I do it, I would say naturally now, because I've been doing it so long that I don't really have a list that I go over. I just start physically scanning everything and ruling out all of these possibilities. But I'm not assuming that I know what's causing that issue out of the gate. When you assume you know what the problem is, then I think, you limit yourself in what you can learn, but then you close the door to future learning. Like when you assume that this is what's happening. Like I've watched instructors, even at other facilities, right away giving the shooter of laundry list of things. Like they give the shooter, well, here, do this differently, and then nothing else has changed. Like they're still shooting shitty and they're missing and things aren't going well. And oh, here, do this. And again, nothing's changed. So their assumptions are, well, I'm going to go down the critical list to cause these errors, and they're passing that on to the shooter. And the shooter's extremely frustrated because nothing that they're doing is fixing the problem, because really it was just an assumption of a list of problems from priority down till they find what's causing the problem. So what I think what makes it really unique is I'm not in a hurry when a shooter is shooting. Like a lot of times I'll just let them keep shooting. Like I'll tell them, they're looking to me for advice. And maybe I'm trying to help you with your approach to shooting here, as well as if you plan on teaching. Like my daughter's getting ready to graduate as a high school teacher. She wants to be a history teacher. And I'm fascinating on those that are trained how to teach a subject, and it doesn't really matter the subject, right? And then those that are masters. And what I have learned, and I finally put my finger on it, like I heard this saying and I was like, oh my God, that's it. Observation without assumption. That is the key word. And I thought that's exactly what we should always be doing when we're teaching. And that's what I do naturally. Now, I couldn't put it to words like when other instructors would ask, well, how did you figure that out? Or what did you see? And it wasn't like I could put my finger on one thing. I was starting to look at everything. And if I didn't find it yet, I left the shooters keep shooting. I didn't just stop them and here, let's try this. Or here, let's try that. Or here, I said, and I've seen it in shooters' faces where I would tell them, hey, go ahead and shoot again. And they're like missing. And they're like, well, I'm like, no, go ahead. Let's just take a look and see what's going on. And then I'd have them shoot again, and I'm watching the targets. I'm watching to make sure that there's, what's going on downrange. Is it something down there or is it back here? And then I start, okay, well, it's definitely back here. So I come back, and I might have them shoot 2 or 3 shots to make sure, are they hitting consistently the same spot, or are they all over the place? There's lots of things I'm looking for. And I'm basically making this big thing while I'm observing, right? I'm trying to say, okay, what all is going right and what is going wrong? Okay, they're all over the place downrange. They're not consistently hitting the same spot. So that tells us that either the wind is changing like crazy, or in this case, if I'm observing the wind while they're shooting and I'm telling them to hold the same spot, and the winds aren't changing dramatically, like heavy winds shifting from one side to the other, then I bring it back to the shooter, and I might have them shoot 2 or 3 more rounds. And I could see the shooter's not having a great time at the moment. They expect me to give them a quick answer that this is the fix and away they'll go. It doesn't always work that way. So I'll tell them, go ahead and shoot again. And I'm standing, if you picture me on the left side of the shooter, and I'm watching them. I'm watching their bipod. I'm basically looking at everything from the tip of the muzzle the whole way back to their feet. And I'm looking, I'm observing the rifle moving. Is it kicking funny? Is it driving funny? Are their hands or fingers bouncing off? Is anything, so I'm going around to the other side. If I still don't see it yet, I'm not assuming anything. I'm still looking. I'm looking to see if I can see it, just through the art of what's going on while they're pulling the trigger. And a lot of times in a couple shots, there it is. You're like, oh no. And you look down and something so simple as their rear bag hidden underneath their shoulder, like they're shooting prone, is twisted. Or there's a stud sticking out on the back of their rifle, catching on the rear bag. Or the toe is caught in the bunny ears of the bag and it's kicking the front of the muzzle up. Or the bipod feet are back against a very stiff shooting mat and it's catching. The bipod is loose. The trigger fingers flying off the trigger as soon as, or they're picking their head up almost as soon as the trigger goes. I can give you a list of things that you'll see that you'll be like, oh. And sometimes it's a small combination of a couple things that's making everything go really, really bad, right? So if I was to give you some advice, if you're really wanting to learn the art, and I am so blessed, like I have the best job in the world. I get to go and shoot for a living. I get to go and teach and share my passion for long-range shooting. And yes, it's very tiring sometimes. And yes, I get tired. I'm 50 now, and my body's beat up. And sometimes it just creaks and aches all the time. But I remind myself that how blessed that I am, that I get to go and do this for a living. I get to go and share my passion with other people and expose them to what I just absolutely love. It's sort of where I belong. And I'm always thankful and grateful that I get to be here with customers and that they come and they get to experience this with me and share their passion of wanting to learn it with me and me get to share it back with them. That is, to me, is just, it's awesome, right? But when we hire on new instructors, it's not the book. A lot of times, they think it's the content that separates the shooting schools out all over the place, and it is in a way. It's your approach, your signature style, or how you approach the subject to try to make it in like a ladder. So as they're climbing, they're building on previous things that they've learned. They're not sort of trying to skip rungs back and forth in a way that doesn't make sense. And so I try to set it up so we're constantly just taking these steps up the ladder in a nice, consistent building on what we've previously learned in a way that makes sense, that new shooters that have never shot beyond 100 yards can pick up. And it's really amazing to watch. Like after 2 days at the shooting school, our average customers have never shot beyond 200 yards. That's the going average for most of the customers coming to the shooting school for the very first time. Have never shot beyond 200 or 300 yards their entire lives, and a lot of times have never shot beyond 100. Right, and by the end of day 2, they're shooting gallon water jugs at 1,000 yards. And so I'm really happy that how we have the program set up, that same student that doesn't know anything about long range shooting at the end of day 2 turns around and looks at you and goes, "Wow, this is easy." And when they say that, then I know I've done a great job, right? That I've laid it out in a way that was easy for them to consume and understand and make sense, and they get it. Like the lights come on and they are off to the races, enjoying the art of long-range shooting and having fun doing it. But when we bring in new instructors, I think the hardest thing to do is, and I catch this quite often with instructors over the years, is I can hear, like, because I always talk about hearing protection. I have earplugs in, but I have electric muffs over my ears so I can hear really well. I turn the volume up of the muffs so I can hear normally, but when a gun cracks, I have double protection, right? But I'll hear, the frustration of a student instructor. They're missing. Where did that one go? I think it went left here. Try this. And they shoot and they miss again. And they shoot and they miss again. And the instructor assumed too much too fast. They didn't take the time to look. They just didn't observe. So if I was to give you some advice, and I've talked about this in other podcasts as well as in the different YouTube contents and stuff like that, but take a minute, just step back and look at everything. Don't change your setup. If you're an instructor, go in with an observation mentality. Don't assume anything. As soon as you assume you stop learning. And you stop seeing new things. Like you've closed that door. And I always said that at the shooting school here, the minute I think I know it all, or that I am the best of the best, I should quit what I'm doing. Because I learn new stuff almost every class. I see something different I've never seen before. I'm exposed to a shooter or a technique I've never seen, or something that somebody's doing that I've never seen them do before. And all of those are learning and allowing me to grow as a teacher. And so I thank the students for coming and bringing those problems here, because it makes me a better teacher, and it reinforces the observation part of what we do. We have to constantly observe the shooters and don't assume anything when they're not doing well. And I think this is the key to a great instructor, is don't immediately blurt out the answer. Wait a minute, look, double check, have them shoot again. Try to verify, even once you think you know what the problem is once or twice. And usually you solve the issue and you're off to the races and it's never an issue again. So observation without assumption. I really love that. I like it so much that I wrote it on a whiteboard above my desk. All right, now on to some good news for the podcast, bad news for the online long-range shooting school. And before we get into that, I do want to say a quick thanks to our sponsors. So MDT is a proud sponsor of the show, maker of great chassis, and we used them here at the school. They have the new HNT 26 along with some new product coming out that's second generation later this summer and possibly the JL next year. So if you're looking for a great chassis for your rifle, custom or otherwise, stop over at mdttac.com, mdttac.com. We'd also like to thank Trigger Tech, also a proud sponsor of the show and maker of world-class triggers. We're going to do a particular podcast, although we've interviewed Trigger Tech here on the podcast in the past. I want to give you some of my 2 cents on the different triggers, why we offer what we do, and some of the reasons why you might want to consider some of the different models and potentially upgrade. So stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. All right, so when we made the announcement that we were potentially going to put the podcast on pause for a little while, we got lots of great emails and phone calls from listeners and people who've been through the schools in the past and saying how much they enjoyed the podcast. And I can't tell you how much I really, really appreciated that. I mean, it's awesome that we are able to take time and do this and share all this great information and actually have people listening to it. It's always pretty cool as well. We were really trying to work hard on the online long-range shooting school, and we had over 330 or 340 minutes published with probably another several hours in the works. And we, over the weekend, had made a decision that we were going to pull that completely and just host our long-range shooting school here for the customers that can come in and attend. And as much as we really were excited about the potential of just reaching everybody that would like to learn and share and just all the information that we can do to help shooters become better and get the most out of their equipment and get the most out of themselves. And we thought that we had a really good system in place as far as going to use Patreon and having people subscribe, and they can subscribe and unsubscribe at any time. So it wasn't something that they had to call in and either register or cancel out. They could do it from the convenience of their own home, and they could do it at any time that they would like, which we thought was awesome. However, though, for us, we have a responsibility when we train this type of stuff that we do a vetting process to make sure that we're training the right people and that we're training people that are U.S. citizens when they come in here to the school, that we have a policy that you have to be a U.S. citizen to attend, and you have to show proof of that. And unfortunately, it's just the way the world is right now. And what we found was that there was a potential for people to be able to log in or basically create almost what we consider like a straw purchase of the shooting school, either through somebody else's name or manipulate. Like one of our employees is going to school for cybersecurity, really bright individual, top of his class. And it was easy and would be easy for people to manipulate and be able to get all of this information without us potentially being able to properly vet them or to make sure that they're people that are using it for goodwill and good intentions, long-range hunters, competitive shooters, all of that great stuff. So to protect ourselves as well as everybody else out there, it shouldn't be available like that. And we just don't have the ability to stop it 100%. We don't believe that we have the gates in place to say that we can stop every single person that shouldn't be or that we should vet or that could potentially be using a straw purchase through somebody else's name or address or anything like that, and then getting access to our content and potentially training people that we really wouldn't want to train. And so this was us making an internal decision about this over the weekend as we keep getting more and more people signed up and trying to vet and make sure we're training right. And it was just brought up that there is that chance that this could happen. And because we can't 100% stop it, we're just not going to do it. That's just, I guess, the point blank. So the good news for the podcast is that unfortunately we spent about 6 weeks already producing and creating all of this great video content. We have pulled it. And we've got some really cool stuff going out to the people that did already register. I think we had 15 students attending the online class already. But I am in business and I am not afraid. I've always learned that the ground under your feet is always moving in business, so you better be as well. and I am not afraid to make decisions. So I made a decision as the founder of the company that bang, it's done. We're going to continue on with our long-range shooting school here and vet as we normally do. And we're going to continue on with the podcast, which is something that I really enjoy doing. But until we can find a way to say, okay, we can 100% guarantee that only the people that should be attending are attending, then we're just not going to post the information up. So what we're going to try to do over the next probably couple weeks here is we have several podcasts that we have done in the past that aren't active right now, and we're going to do a remix. And the first thing we're going to re-release here is our podcast that we did on the Fundamentals of Marksmanship. And it really laid down like the core to what you really need to understand and work on as a long-range shooter and sort of get that idea planted on how important some of the different aspects of it. After we continue with that, we're going to go ahead and republish a great podcast that we did that was on the 4 pillars of marksmanship. And so we're going to take the next month or two putting up all the content to help you get the best out of your rifle, the best out of your shooting, and really as a way of trying to get everybody ready for spring. Spring's coming, competition season's coming, all that really cool stuff. And so we're going to post up all of those. I think there's 8 or 9 episodes that will be coming out with that over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So keep an eye out for that. Next, it's going to be coming up. Lots of great information on helping you get the most out of your rifle. And then we've got a really cool interview coming up with a chassis manufacturer, as well as some really cool reviews we're going to be doing on YouTube on it. We've been playing with a lot of different chassis here this spring. We're getting ready for our shooting school. Our first long-range shooting school kicks off in about 2 weeks. We are booked up solid until September. So if you're interested in attending our shooting school here in Somerset, Pennsylvania, we do have slots open and that are through September and October. I think we have 5 or 8 slots left for the year total. So stop over to wolfprecision.net. You can sign up there, and we'd love to have you come in and attend our class. But we're going to talk a little bit about some chassis and have some really cool interviews coming up, as well as a YouTube video on a really awesome chassis review that I am absolutely falling in love with. So we'll have more details coming out with that soon as well. We're also going to give out some tips and tricks on YouTube as far as trying to help you get the most of your shooting, but not full-on training, like the online school would be almost like a certification course. What we are going to share with you as much as we can and just try to help you get the best out of your rifle, as well as we've got some videos we want to produce on how to properly clean a rifle, how to properly mount your scope, all these little things that might help you get really the best out of you and your shooting and making sure your equipment is squared away and set up properly as well. So really looking forward to a great summer of podcasts. We got lots of great content that we have lined up and ready to go. That puts us right back into the swing of all the content that we're going to put out here on the podcast. So really looking forward to putting out lots of great content here in the future and for you joining us. We really do appreciate it. So my name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.